All right, so a lot of the observations for this talk have come from community engagement. So we do want to give a shout out to these 3 volunteer nonprofit organizations. IAPP, International Association of Privacy Professionals, has a privacy engineering section that builds training for privacy engineers. We invite you to contribute, be part of it as speakers. NIST has a privacy workforce public working group which is building a knowledge base for practitioners to implement the NIST Privacy Framework. You're welcome to participate in that. And IOPD, the Institute of Operational Privacy Design, is building a certifiable privacy by design standard. And if you would like to get involved and contribute, please reach out to me or Jason. So I'm going to give the world's shortest talk on NIST Privacy Framework because it's late in the day and I know we're a little out of time. The NIST Privacy Framework is a voluntary tool for organizations to either build their privacy program from scratch or enhance it if they already have one. It has 5 functional areas. Those names are up there. If you can't read it, it's govern, identify, control, communicate, and protect. These are the higher level areas. They're broken down into categories and subcategories. In total, there are 100 subcategories, which are outcomes or results that you should have in a good privacy program. These 100 subcategories are like sort of a pick list. You can identify which ones you're already meeting to say like, what is your current state in the organization? NIST Privacy Framework doesn't tell you how to do things. It just tells you that this is the expected outcome. And you're welcome to choose the controls or how you want to get to that outcome. And depending on the risk, your resources, priorities, your organizations then can build a target profile and pick from these 100 subcategories on where they want to go. Implementation tiers are the walk to go from your current profile to your target. It is a measure of how risk is incorporated in your program. Not going to go through the definitions, but do want to speak that the NIST Privacy Framework has very specific definitions and has on what it means. Each of these statements reads a certain way, and Katharina spoke about the lack of common definitions and how clear guidelines are missing. So we'll illustrate more about why we need to have common definitions and better communication in the rest of the talk. And before I hand over to Jason, I do want to talk about confirmation bias. And just to, like, the TLDR for this slide is confirmation bias is a cognitive bias where you hear what you want to hear. It reinforces what your previously held beliefs are. And we'll talk about, like Jason will talk about, how most people commonly misread the NIST Privacy Framework due to confirmation bias.
Thank you. So, you know, this comes from our work in NIST and kind of what we see very commonly as misinterpretations, misreadings, and again, people using their own previous understandings about privacy and applying it to the NIST Privacy Framework without necessarily reading the definitions and things how NIST intended. So there are 4 things up here that we see most commonly misinterpreted. So outcomes are confused with controls, and by the way, I'll go quickly over each of these in individual slides, but data is confused with personal data or personally identifiable information. Implementation tiers are confused with what's called maturity, and privacy risk is confused with organizational risk. So outcomes are not controls. So as she mentioned, there's 100 subcategories, and these are outcomes that your organization should be looking to achieve. A privacy control is a administrative, technical, physical measure or safeguard that helps you achieve that outcome. So your outcome might be data are protected as rest, and your privacy control might be that you encrypt hard drives or you encrypt databases. So these are individual controls that help you achieve this kind of overall outcome. But there's a lot of, again, a lot of people kind of conflate those and refer to the outcomes or the subcategories as a list of controls. This is the big one, I think. Data is not personally identifiable information. NIST purposely uses just the term data, one, to avoid the regulatory problem of are we talking about GDPR and personal data? Are we talking about California? Are we talking about federal government regulations and PII? No, NIST says that they're talking about problems that can occur from data. And we heard in another talk about that there's potentially there's problems that aren't necessarily about user data, but by having data, it can cause problems for non-users, bystanders, those sorts of things. But again, people read it and they read the word personal into data and make an assumption about what the NIST is talking, NIST Privacy Framework is talking about. This one is a little bit wonky. Implementation tiers are not maturity levels. For those of you who are not in privacy program management, a maturity level of an organization determines or examines how mature your processes are. Are they very ad hoc? You've got processes, but you don't have them written down. Have they been defined and written down? Are you actually implementing what you wrote down? Are you doing metrics around the effectiveness of your processes, as we heard Leah talk about yesterday? Or are you then reincorporating those metrics and actually improving your process? That's maturity level. Implementation tiers is about how sophisticated your organization is at understanding risk. You may have a very basic understanding of risk, like, yeah, you're doing something that may cause some problems, or you may actually do some research and see, well, what are the concerns that our industry is creating? Or maybe you have a formal risk process where you're actually systematically identifying risk, or maybe you're being ultimately adaptive where you're taking those risks and reincorporating and changing your business based on that. You can have a very low sophistication and understanding of risk, but have very mature processes. Your target is wrong. Or you can have a really sophisticated understanding of risk, but you're doing it in a completely ad hoc manner that isn't good from a process perspective. Privacy risk is not organizational risk. Privacy risk in the NIST Privacy Framework is individual risk, problems that are created for individuals. Now, that may lead to organizational risk like reputation risk, fines, lost market share, et cetera, but it's not the same. And a lot of people conflate those, and they read privacy risk because they've been using privacy risk as kind of the privacy risk of like legal noncompliance and things like that. Okay. So we actually did a quick study of a bunch of articles and a bunch of videos, about 40 videos reviewed and about 50 or so articles to try to find this conflation. As you can see, the biggest kind of misunderstanding was this tiers and maturity level. There was some misunderstanding about outcome controls. Now, this being said, a lot of the articles didn't mention or couldn't be read as misunderstanding that. That doesn't mean that the author didn't or did understand it. And then there was something slightly less than 50% of organizations, or excuse me, articles and videos confuse that data and personal data. We didn't measure the privacy risk one because there really wasn't enough information there to interpret whether the writers or speakers were misinterpreting those things. But the key takeaway here is not necessarily about the NIST Privacy Framework. It kind of goes back to Katharina's talk in that we as privacy engineers talk to a lot of people. We talk to lawyers, we talk to privacy analysts, we talk to privacy program managers, we talk to IT people who don't know privacy, we talk to security professionals, we talk to business folks. it is imperative that we are communicating and talking about the same things and understanding what our business associates and others are talking about when we're interpreting that. So there has to be a common language. I go back to Stephen Covey was an author many years ago, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and the one that I always remember is seek first to understand and then to be understood. So thank you very much.